Good evening, everyone. Wanted to do a quick video on making large pure copper crystals using the copper sulfate that we created in a recent video just the other day. So what I'm doing, I've got my copper sulfate. We made the crystals the other day, but I made a bigger batch of them. So we've got a whole bunch of copper sulfate. What I'm doing is on a little hot plate on a low temperature, I filled it with distilled water. Has to be distilled water to about the 1,000 milliliter mark. And I'm just adding these crystals little bit by little bit on a low heat, stirring it so that they all dissolve. And what you want to do is just keep doing this until the crystals at the bottom do not dissolve any further. That means that the solution is totally saturated with copper sulfate, and that's what we're going to grow our crystals in. Until these crystals stop dissolving, we're just going to keep adding little bits at a time, keep stirring it on a low heat. Like I said, this is distilled water. I'm not sure the exact amount of crystals I'm using for this, but I would say it's probably around the 200 milliliter mark. But, you know, they're easy to make, take a little bit of time. They're easy to buy. You can get them off Amazon if you'd prefer just to buy them, if you don't have the nitric acid or anything to make them with. We're just going to add them little bit by little bit, just until they all dissolve, just until they stop dissolving. And it has to be with warm water. If it's not warm, it takes a lot longer for them to dissolve. It could be days. Just keep stirring them in. This is kind of the first step that we're doing, just until we get a totally saturated solution. So it's distilled water, copper sulfate crystals, which are really cool looking when you see them. I think that might be a little piece of copper in there, I'm not sure. Aren't those pretty cool looking? If you haven't seen that video on how we make them, just scroll down I don't know, what was that, a week ago, a couple days ago, and you'll see how we make them. But I can tell by using the stir stick that I still got some on the bottom here. I think I'm just about fully saturated here. When you get a fully saturated solution, that means you're running at 20% fully saturated copper sulfate solution. And the reason I know it's 20% is because copper sulfate will be saturated up to 20%. And that is as much as they will dissolve in water, up to 20%. After that, they will just build up at the bottom here. I may add just a little bit more. It's better to add a little more until you know for sure that you have some at the bottom, because at the end of this we're just going to filter the solution out to make it just pure liquid, no solids, no remaining crystals. That'll be our next step. But first step, I just want to get all this dissolved in the solution. I'm getting pretty full here on liquid, so if you're going to do this, maybe add a little less liquid, because the more crystals you add, the higher that's going to get to the top here. If these don't dissolve, I may have to take some of this liquid out, keep it for later, but otherwise, hopefully this will be enough. I'm going to let that sit for a few minutes. Like I said, I'm only running it on level 1, just a light heat, just enough to get them dissolved. I guess you could boil the distilled water in a kettle or something as well. I tend to go for the hot plate here just because it's convenient and it's already in the garage, and that's usually where I'm sent to be doing this stuff. So, gonna let this go. I'll check back in with you guys after we get a fully saturated solution, and then we'll go on to the next step of making pure copper crystal. So we're pretty much fully saturated here. What I'm doing is I'm taking all of my crystals, making a fully saturated solution, and running it through my filter, and then putting it into this glass jar. And I'm going to keep all of my copper sulfate solution in there, so whenever I need it, it's already going to be fully saturated, and I don't have to mix it anymore. I'll just store it in there. So I'm just saturating this, throw it in the filter. I'll add some more water in this, saturate it again, just until I'm out of my crystals. That way I can just mix them all up at once, so I don't have to really worry about doing this again. As I said, vacuum pumps are so much easier. This way takes a bit longer, but yeah, well, doesn't matter. Look at the junk in there already. There's some stuff. That's kind of where I'm going right now. By the end of this, I'll have all my copper sulfite in a solution. It has to be a dark blue. You can see how dark that one is compared to that one. This one is fully saturated. I can feel some crystals at the bottom. So I'm going to pour off some of this into this filter. And then I'm going to keep going just until my crystals are done, and then we'll get on to growing pure copper crystals. Okay, so we're getting close. This is all I've got left. There's still some crystals at the bottom here. I'm just stirring them in as I go, filtering it through this very slow non-vacuum filter. The reason why I don't use a vacuum filter on this is because I've only got two, and I don't like mixing different metals in different filters. I try to keep them fairly the same. For example, this one I have, you can see it's got silver in it. I don't like mixing that with other metals. My other one I use for gold. So I'm just using the slow version here. These work great. They're just very slow. But when I get the rest of this dissolved in, filter it in there, this is going to be our solution that we're going to grow our copper crystals in. But while we wait for this slow process to go, I'm going to show you what we're doing next. So I've got a 1,000 milliliter beaker. I got a copper wire, and I stripped off, if you can see, stripped off most of the covering on it, so it exposes the copper, and I just kind of twisted it up a little. I'm going to place it in there. I could probably even strip a little more off because I got quite a bit left here. But regardless, what we're going to do, just going to bend that over like that. Let's take this. It's going to be the same idea as our silver cell, except we're using copper sulfide. So we've got that set there. We've got our copper anode basket here. Don't mind that. It's got copper shot that I just melted down from copper pipe and wires and whatnot. And I made this little doohickey here from just a Home Depot bucket. I'm going to put that on like that. We're going to put that inside there. So this is going to be in our water, or in our solution I should say. We're going to hook up our positive charge here and our negative charge down here. And all this copper is going to electrolytically, if that's a word, use electrolysis to shoot it down, and the crystals are going to build from this exposed copper wire here. That's the idea. Same idea with the silver cell, but a little different. Instead of using dissolved copper itself, which I have tried before and it worked once. But then my cell died. It just didn't have any amps going through it. So I researched a bit, and apparently copper sulfide is the way to do it. So we're going to try this. We're going to fill this up with copper sulfate solution. We're going to hook it up to the voltage, and hopefully, although it is a very slow process, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. Hopefully we can start to see little crystals form within a few days, but this is something that's going to take at least a week or two to get a little bit of growth. This is a slow process, much slower than silver, but this is a lot of my waste. Just some stuff here. This is old waste buckets, and I'm cementing out some copper, but regardless, we're getting there. So next part of this video, I am going to fill up that beaker full of this solution and hook up to the power supply, and hopefully we can start growing some big pure copper crystals. Okay, here we are. Now, I hope this works. I've seen it before where you just get a copper brick or a big piece of copper and just attach it from one side, and then have your cathode on the other side, and they kind of grow horizontally. I haven't seen them done with big anode baskets kind of like this, so I'm not positive this way is going to work, but that's the fun of all this, is trial and error. If this doesn't work, then we'll go to the horizontal way to do it, but we know we've got our solution, and it is definitely saturated. So we're going to hook up. This is our negative charge here, and we will get our anode basket hooked up to the red, which is our positive charge. This could be our issue if we have an issue, and hopefully we'll get some amps. If we don't get amps, then there's not a current going through it, but oh yeah, that is exactly what we want, except we don't want it that high. These tend to grow best on a low, slow voltage. That is really good. That's exactly what I was hoping for. I'm going to set it at this. I may bump it up later, grow them quicker, but like I said, the slower and longer they take, the stronger and larger they'll become. If you do it really quick, they will obviously grow faster, but they will get more brittle and longer and stringier. So we'll see. A lot of this, it's kind of like a black art. It's very trial and error. I don't think there's a real set way to do it. This is what we're going to try. These are our values. All we know for sure is the saturated solution is what we want. We've got our copper wire hanging down here. It's hopefully, because the solution's pretty dark, it's going to be hard to see what we're growing in here. I may need a flashlight when I do this, but as they get bigger, we'll be able to see it. Kind of see that there's already a little bit of fuzz on there, so hopefully this is actually working. So what I'm going to do is leave this going for a couple of days, and I probably won't change the voltage. If I do, I'll just put it at 2, and we'll just say we're going to leave it at 2. If I can even get it to 2. What? Okay, whatever. We'll leave it. There we go. 2 volts. That's what we're leaving it at. We'll leave it at this for a few days. I'll post this video and I'll do periodic checkups, and we'll see if this is actually going to work. Trial and error, man. That's what I tell you. That's half the fun. So this is growing pure copper crystals. Take 1. Let's hope it works.